Hey everyone, welcome. This is Jason Clemens, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We are live right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas. We're live on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio. I apologize to the people on the radio. I missed the little intro right after Robert Pratt, so I apologize for that. I was still seeing patients. We just got here, so man, this is going to be good because I'm on fire. I'm ready to go. And this is going to be a good show, I hope. We've been talking about all kinds of stuff this week, and we're just going to pick up where we left off. We had some things that we were going to talk about last night, and we're just going to pick up where we left off with that parasympathetic nervous system, and then we're just going to keep working our way through it. So hope you guys had a good day. We've had a solid, busy day right here at the Rock. It's been great all day long, and lots of adjustments, lots of great conversations. We're on 98.7. We're on 1490 AM, 1420 AM, 987radio.com. We're on all of our social media pages, and we're ready to get after it. If you got a question, if you got a comment, anything that you would like to send me, you can send me you can send me a text, 806-794-0400. And let me find that office phone. I didn't get it so far. So, but 806-794-0400. You can leave me a message on social media if you'd like to. We'll try to get back to you. If you have a question, a comment, anything that you've heard this week that you didn't understand, or anything that you heard that you thought was wrong. I don't want to give out any wrong information. You know, sometimes people in my field get accused of disinformation, and I have tried as hard as I can so far not to have any disinformation. And so, if you catch me, then point it out to me. I'm totally fine with that. But we're just trying to bring you the facts. We're trying to bring you the facts and talk about health. So first thing I want to talk about, because it's really cool. One of our platinum members of our office, one of our platinum members of our radio or our Facebook page, and watches the show all the time. She came in the gym this morning to work out like she does twice a week for the last 6 years, and she said it just kind of finally hit me, and she said I was thinking about that word environment. And because, you know, you're always saying environment. If we just put ourselves in the proper environment, then our cells will express health. And she's like, she said, I was thinking about that word environment, and I was thinking about God creating the earth and all of the things in it before he created us. And I was like, yep. And she's like, and he created the environment that we are to thrive in before he created us. Like, yep, that's right. The first, what do we say on Monday night that you guys didn't get to hear because our radio was all messed up? But the temple, right? That's what they preached at Sunday morning at Hillside. Was the very first temple was the Garden of Eden. And so the preacher went from there, the Garden of Eden, and what did he say Garden of Eden was? It was the place where God met man and had a relationship in that garden. It's like God would come down and hang out, and they would talk, and they would walk, and that was the environment that was made, and man was put in charge of the environment. Man was put in charge of naming the animals and all the stuff. That's how the story goes, right? Well, we're the ones that messed that up. And we're the ones that are still messing that up. And if you think about it, that's what I keep trying to say. And she said it so eloquently this morning. It was great. It really kind of finally hit her. And she was like, I see what you're saying now. And it's probably, what's it been? She's probably heard 300 shows, and she's been getting adjusted for, I don't even know how long, 15 years or something like that. Like, she's as involved in what we're doing as any other patient that I have in my entire practice. She's listening to us right now, I'm sure. And it took that long a period of time for her to finally say and really in depth get it. Like, I've been I've been put in charge of my own environment, and the the repercussions of what I get when I'm the one that messes up my environment. That's what she's like, I get it. And then I'm like, how cool is that? And I can tell you, when I started in chiropractic, I was 17 years old. I injured my shoulder in a football game. There was a chiropractor in town that took care of athletes. My coach said, hey, you need to go see Dr. Payne, of all things. His name was Dr. Payne. And so he said, you need to go see Dr. Payne. And so I went to see Dr. Payne at 7 in the morning before school. And and he said, do you want to get adjusted? And I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like, you guys have heard me talk about my dad. He had ankylosing spondylitis and it's spinal arthritis. And I didn't know anything about health when I was 17 years old. And I just laid down on the table and got my first adjustment. I didn't understand what a subluxation was until March of 2000. So I got my first adjustment in 1987, and I didn't even understand the word subluxation until 2000. So it was whatever that is, 13, it was really 12 and a half years about that it took me of going in and out of chiropractic, hanging around my brother-in-law, going out, hanging around, getting away from him, like getting adjusted, going away, coming back, listening to him talk, and then finally going to work in his office and seeing it every single day, hundreds of times a week. Seeing people come in, I would watch them come in as new patients, and then I would watch them go through their treatment, and then I would watch them improve. And I was like, man. And then we went, that first week, we went to Los Angeles. We went to that seminar, and it had those shirts on it that said, got subluxation, like got milk. It said, got subluxation. And on the back, it said, get adjusted. And I was like, you didn't invent that word? You've heard me say that before, right? So I went from 17 years old in 1987 to 29 years old in March of 2000 before I ever thought about what that meant. So when she said it this morning, it's like, I get it. Sometimes it takes a long time. And that's part of the reason that when you come into the office, that's part of the reason that we do what we do here at The Rock is like, I try to make sure everybody that comes in, I got a whole stack of notebooks on my desk that I got to get to people, but I try to get you a notebook. And I try to go through an exam, and I try to share as much of that information with you. And I try to do as much as I can to share that. And that's like why, we do the show 5 nights a week and say the same things mostly every night. I know sometimes it's boring as heck, but we say the same thing over and over and over again because eventually it's going to one day, it's just going to be like a light bulb just comes on. That's what happened to me. It was like, I see what you're talking about. Interference in the normal way that it should work. That's what the subluxation is. And you can notice it in a restaurant. Like you can go out to eat and you can walk into a restaurant and you can start seeing the subluxations right off the bat. Like it doesn't take you a second. On your way into the restaurant, how dirty is the sidewalk in front of the restaurant? Like how many cigarette butts are sitting out there and gum stuck to the concrete and it looks like it hadn't been power washed in years and the outside's not painted properly and all that sort of thing. You can immediately start to tell, this is not going to be great. And then you walk inside and you can tell whether or not the hostess is trained or they're not trained, whether or not we got any servers inside the building, whether the manager cares anything about the service or the manager doesn't. Is the owner even present or the owner's not present? Sit down. How's the food? How's the service? You can tell, right? You can tell immediately whether or not there's subluxation. Leslie and I were going to go to Salada and get a salad for lunch. And I headed down 82nd Street, and they're doing construction down there at Upland. And the cars were backed up like half a mile or something from the stoplight. And I was like, shoot, we're never going to get through this at lunchtime. So I just did a U-turn. And it was like, no, I'm not going to go through that. That traffic is subluxated, right? It's not moving the way it's intended to move because there's some sort of disruption down there along the way. And that's what happens inside of our bodies. And that's what every one of these shows is about. That's what last night's show was about when we were talking about, we were talking about these x-rays. And hang on, can't get to them here. But there's all kinds of x-rays that we could look at. Let me see this. Yeah, there's one right there. So there's a patient right there. And what do you see when you look at that x-ray? I know you guys on the radio can't see it at all, but what do you see? You see a plate and screws. That'd be 4 screws. There's going to be 2 up here. You can't see them. There's going to be 2 down here, and that's a plate. So here's C2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are plated together. That's a disruption in the nervous system. It was a disruption previously because that disc must have bulged, and then they were having the radiating pain running down their arm. That was disruption of the nervous system. And now that person comes in and they're dealing with this surgical type of thing that's going on right there. So you can see it. You could go through all kinds of different ones. I've got several of them pulled up. Let me see. Here's one that is an x-ray of a picture from the front that you can kind of see. And yesterday we were talking about that occiput and that atlas. And there it is. Hang on. Yeah, so look at this one from the front. Whoops, sorry. And look at the bend that's going on in that cervical spine. That green line is normal, and that spine is bent to the right. And if you follow where that cervical spine was going down, it would go in through the middle of that thoracic spine, and that thing's curved all the way down. That's your scoliosis type of thing going on. But look over here in this little section right here, and look how this joint is all bad looking over here. That degeneration that's going on right there. What does that mean? That's an end result of subluxations over time. Interference in the way that it's supposed to work over time. And it's interference because we put ourselves in an environment that's incongruent with health. If you put the cell in an environment that's incongruent with health, then what you will get in it is the body trying to adapt, and the body trying to adapt will end up with some side. Eventually, you'll end up with some sort of symptom. Okay? So let me take a quick little drink. All right. I've been missing that since lunch. And then let's pick up where we left off last night when we were talking about sympathetic and parasympathetic. And I want to see if I could do a better job of explaining what this means about the parasympathetic innervation to a cell, and try to explain it and see if it makes any sense at all. Okay, so last night, oh heck, hang on, because it's live and it's real, and sometimes my batteries die. Hang on. All right, we're good to go. So, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. My dad had a way of settling us down when we got a little bit rowdy as kids. And most of the time, all he had to do was like snap his fingers. And that was enough to let us know that we should calm down a little bit. Okay? If if the brain communicates with the body through the nervous system. That's the number one thing. This central nervous system, if in any book you read, the central nervous system is the master system of the body. Everybody agrees on that. The CNS, the central nervous system, that's the brain and the spinal cord. That's the master system of the body. You can't live 1 second without your brain and spinal cord working. You can, if you cut your spinal cord, you can still live. But if your brain stops, you're done. You don't go further than that. And I've never heard it for them to restart your brain and get your brain to work again. When you're brain dead, you're legally dead, and that's the end of it. So the central nervous system is going to communicate with the body. The brain is going to communicate with the body through the nervous system. And then the peripheral nervous system are the nerves that come off the spine. And they go to all of our muscles and organs and all of our body. So we got all this peripheral nervous system. They either come off the spine or they come off the vagus nerve. Either way. But so let's say we want to shunt blood. Let's say we're doing the sympathetic nervous system. We've got fight or flight going on, right? So our brain detects some sort of threat. We've got this threat that's happening in the right brain, and our brain is going to try to push blood from the core of our body where it's not needed, mostly, like our stomach and our digestive tract. We don't need any. We don't really need a lot of nutrition to our digestive tract. So what are we going to do? We're going to shunt blood to the muscles and of our arms and legs to try to push the blood out. Now, how's the brain going to do that? The brain is going to move that blood. It's going to shunt that blood by contracting blood vessels. Now, think about that for a second, because I do not know the answer to this question. I do not know the how many miles of blood vessels are in the body. I think I've heard that before, but I can't tell you right off the top of my head. You might could Google it and send me a message or something. But think about that for just a second. Think about how intricate the brain to the body is when it has the ability to contract a muscle around a vessel, which is smooth muscle, and your autonomic. What we were talking about last night is autonomic nervous system. An autonomic nervous system means that you're not in control of it. It's being run by your innate intelligence. You're not deciding to speed up your heart or slow down your heart. You're not deciding to release acid in your stomach. You're not deciding to increase peristalsis in your gut. That's all happening with your autonomic nervous system, and it's either happening with your sympathetic nervous system that's putting the pressure on the gas, or it's happened with the parasympathetic nervous system that's putting the pressure on the brake. Or it's taking the pressure off the gas. That's another way you can do that. You can take the pressure off the brake. There's kind of 4 ways that happens right there, okay? So the autonomic nervous system is reacting based on the detection of a threat in the environment, and now we need to be able to send a signal to the blood vessel. So we've got this blood vessel, and on the outside of this blood vessel, we've got muscles. Let me see how I can do this. We've got muscles that are in that. It's actually part of the blood vessel itself, but there's muscles along that wall. And now, of course, this is in a circle, right? This whole thing is in a circle around that blood vessel and going all the way around. And then we've got nerve supply from the brain We got nerve supply from the brain all the way around that blood vessel. Now that's pretty weird, but it's the way it works. Okay, so now if your brain wants to increase your blood pressure, if your brain wants to move blood from one part of your body to the other part of your body, then your brain's going to contract those muscles and it's going to push that blood, it's going to open up blood vessels. And really, the blood vessel innervation is only sympathetic, it's not really parasympathetic. So you're either contracting or you're contracting less. That's how you control your blood pressure. It's not parasympathetic turns it off and sympathetic turns it on. It's not actually like that. If you need to contract it, then your sympathetic nervous system, your right brain, your fight or flight response is what's going to contract the blood vessel, contract the muscle around the blood vessel, which is going to decrease the diameter of the blood vessel, which is going to increase the pressure, which is going to push that blood somewhere else, right? So I can tighten down all of the blood vessels in my intestines, and I can push all the blood outside to my muscles so that I can get as much oxygen and glucose to my muscles as I need to fight or run. That's the sympathetic response of being able to move that around, okay? So one of the things that we've been talking about for the last couple of nights is this increased sympathetic tone. Increased sympathetic tone. It's just the whole body is just tight. Everything, the sympathetic nervous system is sending a signal through the nerve to the muscle surrounding the blood vessel to tell the muscle around the blood vessel to contract. And now we're increasing the blood pressure. And the first thing we all are taught is that this is some sort of mistake that the body's making to increase the blood pressure. So you go to the doctor, your blood pressure's high. You better get on a blood pressure medication. And I'm not saying yes or no on that. What I am saying is we don't ever ask the question, why are you having high blood pressure? I'm asking that same question because I've been dealing with high blood pressure for a year now. I've been trying to figure it out. And so I'm still trying to figure it out. So it's like, why can't I get my blood pressure down? And I've changed my caffeine. I've changed my eating times. I've tried to sleep better. I've tried to figure out what it is, and I'm still working on it. And I know eventually I'm going to figure it out. So because I'm not going to stop, so I'll figure it out. But that's what's happening right there. There's a chemical. There's a firing pattern of a nerve to a muscle, and at that nerve muscle junction, there's a junction right there where that nerve meets the muscle. Okay, now let's flip it over to parasympathetic. The threat is gone, and the parasympathetic nervous system is trying to inhibit. That's the way that the parasympathetic nervous system gets you to open up the blood vessel and to decrease your blood pressure is by sending a signal over to the sympathetic nervous system to inhibit the sympathetic nervous system. So now your parasympathetic it doesn't go directly to the blood vessel. It goes to the sympathetic nervous system and tells it, hey, would you calm down? The threat is over. And then the sympathetic says, okay, fine. And it relaxes the blood pressure, the blood vessel from contraction. The muscle, it relaxes that muscle, opens up the blood vessel and decreases the pressure. Now the blood can flow freely throughout the entire body. Okay? And it can flow back into the intestine. Maybe we even squeeze a little bit of the blood away from the muscles and bring it back into the core so that the core can digest the food. We can have that immune system that's 80% of it's in our gut. We can have that reproduction and that posture, right? Okay. So let's take this analogy, this example, and let's understand when that parasympathetic nervous system, when that part of your brain decides we need to send a signal, it's going to send a signal through the nerve, and it's going to end at a synapse somewhere where that nerve is going through to that cell. It's going to end at that cell somewhere in a synapse situation. You're going to have either it's going to dock directly with a receptor, it's going to dock with another nerve, it's going to hit the muscle belly, wherever, whatever it's going to do, right? This parasympathetic is going to come through there, and it's going to attach itself to a part of the body, and that's where it's going to be able to tell that cell to relax. And that's how the parasympathetic nervous system tells the body to calm down. Okay? We're going to take a break, but when we get back from the break, we're going to talk about the fact that almost all disease processes, there is a failure, there is a degeneration of parasympathetic connective activity to those end organs. And what we end up with is the inability to rest and recover. Hang on with us. We're going to take a break for a minute, and we'll be right back. This is Life with Jason Clemens, DC, and we'll be right back right after these messages. We'll take just a second. We'll take just a second and regroup. We'll let the radio people have a chance to hear this on the other side of the break. And if there's anything about that you disagree with, or is anything about that you don't understand, and you want to send me a message, you can also send me a text, 806-794-0400. And because I know that's a little bit complicated. But I hope it makes sense about once you get to start to understand, it's like, okay, I got to be able to rest and recover. So what does that mean? I need to take a nap? No, not necessarily. It just means that my cells have to be able to rest and recover. Like one of my ladies today, she takes care of her two granddaughters, and they're juniors in high school, and they play golf. And they were in regional golf tournament in Dallas, somewhere in the Metroplex this weekend, or this week, like just got back Tuesday. So she spent 4 days running around the Metroplex, and she's exhausted, and she's a hard working lady. I mean, she owns her own company, and she's really is. I've been taking care of her for years, and she's a hard working lady, and she's a good gal too. But she's hurt herself in the past. And when she got up out of the chair to come over and get adjusted today, she was very slow and tender and like exhausted. She was exhausted. And I tried to explain to her, I was like, listen, that's dangerous. That's real. You got to be careful tonight. You got to be careful tomorrow, because that vertebra is connected. Those vertebrae are connected together, and they've got that disc in the middle of them. And then they've got the spinous process, and then they've got this transverse process. And then that whole thing is covered in muscle. Hang on one second. Let me get us back on the radio. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemens, DC. We're gonna get back to that parasympathetic in just a second. But I was given an example of one of my patients today that came in that is very, very exhausted. She spent several days at a golf tournament, and she's very, very tired. Like worn out tired, like really, really tired, right? So I was drawing this picture of all these little, what we call intrinsic muscles. They're little small muscles. Like some of them go from spinous to spinous, and then some of them go from spinous to transverse, and then one of them will skip a segment and go down, and then this one will come over here, and then it'll skip a segment and go down. And so we've got this, we've got all these like muscles that are going from all these different areas, and then we've got them going in between the transverse processes, and we've got this whole, we got all these little muscles that are on top of this whole thing like that, right? Those are intrinsic muscles, and those intrinsic muscles are under the control of the cerebellum. The cerebellum is that little part of the brain that is, it's smooth muscle, no, smooth muscles, organs, glands, that's autonomic. Balance, coordination, and posture. Posture, believe it or not, posture is mostly input. Posture, that's kind of an interesting thing. Posture is getting input from those little muscles. All these little muscles, there's none of them are big enough to hold any weight. They really are mostly, they're not really stabilizers. They're mostly proprioceptive inputs, meaning they're data collection muscles of the segment that's taken. It's taking inventory of what's going on at the segment. Okay, so what does cortisol do? Cortisol from our adrenal glands, when we're exhausted, when we're stressed, physical, chemical, or mentally emotional. We don't have to be mentally emotional stressed. We could be physically stressed. And physically stressing our nervous system can fire that whole sympathetic response, and it could be stressful on the body, which will release the cortisol, which will inhibit the cerebellum, which will lose the control of all these intrinsic muscles around that spine. Now, it's like you shrink wrap something. Like if you were to shrink wrap a steak or something, and then you were getting ready to cook that steak, you'd take a pair of scissors and you cut that shrink wrap, and then it'd go like it just fill up with air as soon as you cut the shrink wrap off of it, right? That's what I imagine those little intrinsic muscles being like all around the spine right there. They're like holding on, and they've got good tone. They're not too tight. They're not too loose. They got good tone, and they're reporting all of the movements that's going on in that section of the vertebra, that of the spine. It's recording the movement, and it's reporting that movement into the cerebellum, and the cerebellum is taking all that information, and it's keeping us in good posture. Now that cerebellum is actually, okay, it's balancing us, because it's taking all of that intrinsic data around that spine. But what happens if those muscles are just fatigued beyond belief? Like they can't hold. And I told her, I was like, you remember, we've watched the movies in the past where the guy's hanging on to the rope and he's falling off the cliff, and he can't hang on any longer. And then all of a sudden he just finally lets go of the rope and he falls down to his death or whatever. Why did he let go of the rope? He let go of the rope because he fatigued. The muscles in his arms fatigued. He couldn't hold the rope any longer, and then they just quit. And this is the same thing that happens in the low back. We get this fatigue. What did I say? It happens in the brain first. Then it happens in the low back. So we get this fatigue that's happening in these muscles of the low back. And now you lean over to tie your shoe, and all of a sudden, it's like, ow, that really hurt. Like that something went out in my back. Or you leaned over to pick up a case of water, or you took a dish from the dishwasher or from the sink, and you were going to lean and put it in the dishwasher, and just having the weight of a dish, and you twisted, and then all of a sudden you hurt your back. We've been there. We've all been there. A lot of us have been there in that scenario to where it didn't take anything for us to hurt ourselves. And it's like, Doc, all I did was just lean over to tie my shoes, and then my back went out. And I'm like, no, it's not all you did. You do not just hurt yourself leaning over and tying your shoes. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back, because there were a lot of things that were going on before then, right? And this is kind of what I'm talking about the inability to rest and recover. Now, she's exhausted, so she's got to stop. And I told her, I said, you got to be careful. I said, are you going back to work this afternoon? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, or she's like, I got to go to Costco because everybody's coming to my house for Easter. And so I got to go to Costco. And I was like, okay, well, you're going to have to be careful because you have the girls are going with you. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, have the girls lift the stuff. I'm serious. Like, this is dangerous for the rest of the day. You need to get some recovery. You need to get some recovery in those muscles. Those muscles have got to get blood supply. Those muscles have got to get glucose. Those muscles have got to get oxygen. Those muscles have got to get rest. That whole thing has got to recharge itself. And then tomorrow, when it's recharged, it will be able to contract and hold better, and you'll be safer. But you're running the danger. What the danger is the danger. Number one, something simple would be a sprain strain. You could sprain your ligament, you could strain your muscles. That would be the best case scenario if you were going to have something go wrong. But then all of a sudden, now we could get a disc bulge. And that's disc bulge, if it goes all the way to level 5, is surgical. And we don't want that, right? We don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that we've got to control our environment, as we were talking about this morning. We've got to control our environment, okay? So we need the ability to rest and recover. So let's get back to talking about parasympathetic, because parasympathetic is now when the brain wants the cell, whatever cell that brain is trying to get to rest and recover, that connection that's between the nerve and the cell, what we know, or what we're starting to learn, is that there's degeneration. There's degeneration in that connection point between the parasympathetic nerve and the end organ, whatever that end organ will be. There's a degenerative thing. It's kind of like an old wire, like on a boat motor or something, or an old wire to a blinker, like your tail lights or something on a trailer. And it's just like been sitting out in the weather for years, and then that old wire is just all rusty, and where that wire connects to the tail light, it's just kind of all just got corroded away or something, and then now the tail lights don't work because that whole thing is just ruined. It's just rusted away and just ruined. That is a thing. That is a thing that happens to us, and we lose the ability to rest and recover. And so that's chronic. That's going to be chronic disease. Like that's a bad thing when we get to that point. We got to protect that nervous system. So when we do heart rate variability, and we look at, we'll actually graph it out on our heart rate variability scale, and this bottom line is the parasympathetic, and this top line is the sympathetic. What does that mean? Are you guys following that? Like, is it clicking? Like, when I say sympathetic and parasympathetic, does it confuse you? Or are you just like, oh yeah, I know what he's saying? Like sympathetic, fight or flight. Name the things that happen during the fight or flight response. My pupils are going to dilate. My blood pressure is going to go up. My heart rate's going to go up. My core is going to shut down. Like my logical behavior is going to shut down. My instinctive behavior is going to go up. Those are all like activities that are going to happen inside the body with sympathetic response. Parasympathetic, just do the opposite, basically. My pupils are going to constrict. Think about it. I don't need to look around. I'm not threatened by anything. Like I could just calm down. I could just focus on something. I don't need to be wide-eyed and looking around at everything because there's nothing threatening me right now. I'm just gonna bring it back down. And then my heart rate is just gonna calm down. And my blood pressure is just gonna come down. And then all that blood's gonna come back to my core. And then I'm gonna fire up that digestive tract, and I'm going to fire up that immune system and that reproductive system, right? All that's going to work better because I'm going to be in parasympathetic dominance. I'm going to calm it down a little bit, right? Okay, so when we measure it in this heart rate variability, that's what we're talking about, is heart rate variability. There's positive directions, and there's negative directions, and I'll change the... And so when we score it, you get a heart rate variability test, and you score it, and where you want to be is you really want to be right over here at 1 and 1. You want to be positive 1 on your parasympathetics, and you want to be positive 1 on your sympathetics. Meaning, I am calm, I'm relaxed, but I'm ready to fight if I have to. It's like I always think of it being in the starting blocks of the 100-meter dash in the Olympics. I've never been there. I've never been in the 100-meter dash, period. But I've seen it. And you look at those guys, Usain Bolt and all those guys, and Carl Lewis over the years. They're in the blocks, and they're calm, but they're ready to fire as soon as the gun goes off. Okay, that means that we've turned our parasympathetics up just a little bit. If I turn my parasympathetics up, I relax more. If I turn my sympathetics up, I fight or flight more. So I just want 1 and 1. Okay? This is quadrant 1, and this is where I want to start. This is quadrant 2. This is quadrant 3. And this one over here is elite athletes over here. So here's what we see when we do heart rate variability in the office. This is what we see first. We see people move from quadrant 1 into quadrant 2. And so you guys on the radio, if you put a plus sign in the middle of your paper, quadrant 1's on the top right-hand corner, and quadrant 2 is on the top left-hand corner. Okay? So if a person moves, and it'll usually move up. So what are we seeing happening? Like their starting point isn't right there any longer. Their starting point isn't there. Now their starting point is over here. So what has happened to them? They have moved 1, 2, 3 spots negative in their parasympathetic nervous system. They have decreased their rest and recover ability 3 clicks to the left. Okay? And then what happens to their sympathetics? Their sympathetics go up, which is positive. So does that make sense? They've turned down their parasympathetics. Their rest and recover ability has turned down, and their fight or flight has turned up. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is they're no longer able to rest and recover. So their rest and recover part of their nervous system has decreased in function and ability. And so in order to get through the day, they have to fight. They have to fight their way through the day. It's like I can't recover. So, like, you ever had to pull an all-nighter, like in college when you're writing a paper or whatever, or you have to work all night long, or whatever the thing is that you got to do, and you just like suck it up. You're just like, hey, look, dude, I got to get this done, and it's got to be done tonight, and I got to turn this paper in tomorrow. So I'm tired. I need to rest, but I've got to force myself through the night. I might drink 8 cups of coffee or whatever, try to write this paper through the middle of the night. But I am not going to go to sleep tonight. I'm going to increase my fight or flight. I'm going to increase my intensity of the day. I'm going to make myself fight my way through that. And that's what you see when you do heart rate variability on people. When they start getting sick, they start moving from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2. And then their sympathetic nervous system can only hold up for so long. It's a time. Some people can go longer than others, but eventually what's happening is we've lost that ability to rest and recover. And as soon as our sympathetics fail, and now we're talking about this. We're talking about this right brain, this right side brain fight or flight response that is firing. This right side brain fight or flight response that's firing down to this adrenal gland and this cortisol, and it's firing that whole system, right? So now our cortisol is going to rise. And what does cortisol do for us? It helps us coagulate our blood, but it also increases our blood glucose. That's why when we get stressed out, our sugars go up, right? And it inhibits our cerebellum, which is now we lose our balance, coordination, and posture. So this system just can't sustain itself. Because remember, how long is it supposed to work? It's supposed to work for 90 seconds. It's not supposed to work for longer than 90 seconds. You're either dead, the tiger ate you, or you killed the tiger, or you got away from the tiger. That's it. But how many of us drive that 90 seconds to an hour? And then we drive that hour to a day. And then we drive that day to a week. And then that turns into a month. And then we got a year. And then we got another year. And we got another year. And every time I explain that to people, every single time I explain that to people, especially people that are stressed out, they just look at that and they're like, I get that. I understand what you're saying right there. I'm totally on board with that whole thing, because that's where our power of adjustment, the power of adjustment poster. That's that whole thing right there. The explanation of the power of adjustment poster. And I've showed you guys this before. Yeah, and let me see if I can. Maybe I can make that a little bigger. Yeah. So here's that whole sympathetic response thing that's happening. So now all these parts of the brain, there's that amygdala, and there's that memory center for all those stressful events that's ever happened before in our life, right? And then that amygdala is going to fire to that locus coeruleus, and that locus coeruleus is going to fire that adrenaline, and that right hemisphere, it's going to flood the brain with adrenaline, but the right hemisphere has an affinity for adrenaline, and so that stress response has an affinity for adrenaline. I was having a conversation today about alcohol. I was having a conversation about tattoos, however you say that, whichever side of that has the emphasis, right? I can't get this guy to quit drinking. And then my tattoo person says, yep, I get one every year. I look forward to it. It's the way I treat myself. It's my treat for myself is to get myself the tattoo. Yep. Why? Same thing as the chocolate. Same thing as the pornography. Same thing as the driving fast. What is it doing? It's giving us dopamine. But because we're not getting dopamine, because we're flooding the brain with adrenaline. And then the right hemisphere with this amygdala firing is going to fire down to this adrenal gland, which is going to release our cortisol. And when it fires down to our adrenal gland to release our cortisol, then we're going to get this whole thing, this locus coeruleus over here is going to fire. Then eventually we're going to get this HPA axis to fire. And then what are the things on the list? Anxiety, depression, concentration issues like ADHD. Let me see if I can read it right there. Yeah, accelerated aging. You just look old. You know how many people that we get come into the office that are my age, 54 years old, that look like they're 60 something? Like I saw a girl yesterday that we've known for 25 years. We passed her in a parking lot. Leslie and I saw her in a parking lot, and she said, "How old is she?" And I said, "I don't know. She's got to be 60 something." And Leslie looked her up, and it said her birthday. She's younger than I am. Like she's a couple months younger than I am, but she looks old. The stress over time has really done some work on her. That environment that she's put herself in has increased her aging. It accelerated her aging, right? ADD and ADHD, type 2 diabetes, obesity, trouble sleeping, high cholesterol. When you show people that poster and you show them all those things that are on that poster, it's 100%. Everybody that's stressed out, they totally understand that. They're like, you just described me. And I'm like, yes, I described you because what I described was how the nervous system works. And that's that sympathetic response that's over there. And that's what's going on. That's what I'm talking about when I say, when we look at heart rate variability and we see in the heart rate variability this transition of a person from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2, that's a scary thing for me because I understand this little deal: alarm, adapt, fatigue, illness, and death. The 5 stages of the stress response, according to Dr. Chestnut. What's happening? They received an alarm when they were over here. That's number 1. The alarm was number 1. They tried to adapt to the alarm. That's what this is. They're trying to adapt. But they can't adapt because that environment is incongruent with health. You can't adapt to white sugar. You can't adapt to white sugar. It was not in the garden. It was not in existence when the DNA was made. However you look at it, whether you're a creationist or whether you're an evolutionist, white sugar didn't exist on the planet when the DNA was made. There's no genetic code that tells you how you're supposed to adapt to white sugar. There was sugar cane, there was beets maybe along the way, but there wasn't refined white sugar. You can't adapt to it. It's an environment that's incongruent with health. We can't adapt to carbonated water. We're never supposed to be drinking carbonated water. We can't adapt to artificial colors and sweeteners. What did Robert Kennedy say yesterday? What's the autism rate in America? 1 in 20? 1 in 20 8-year-old boys have autism now? Why? I know that's a big question, is why. Nobody really knows the answer, but we're not adapting to our environment. What are we doing to our kids? We're putting our kids in an environment that's incongruent with health. And then we're putting the moms in an environment that's incongruent with health. And what are those things that are incongruent with health? Acetaminophen is one of them. That's that's every show we've ever done since the beginning of the shows. It's why it's so, sometimes it's so boring to listen to, because it's like, dude, you can't adapt to this environment. So what happens next? Fatigue. I'm getting tired. What did I talk about with the girl, the lady? She's tired. We've got to get untired. We've got to rest and recover. We got to get out of this sympathetic response, and we got to get back into parasympathetic response, which is in the left brain. I know y'all think I'm nuts, but it's like, look, it goes right side to left side. And what I'm saying is this is not happening. And so it's right side only. And right side only is increasing anxiety, increasing aging, increasing diabetes. Where is focused attention? Is over here in the left hemisphere. Where's dopamine? It's in the left hemisphere. We're not getting that. We're not getting dopamine. We got to go get a tattoo. We got to drink some more alcohol. We got to have another Snickers bar. That's external dopamine coming in, right? We lost our ability to adapt. We're losing it. We're losing it, and we're fatiguing. And what's the next thing that's going to happen? We're going to get sick. We're going to go down here. And then when the patient shows up and they're down here to start, that means the parasympathetic has fatigued and the sympathetic now has fatigued, and we're in trouble. That's why we got to eat well, move well, and think well. And if we do those things, we will express wellness. That's all I got for you tonight. I hope that was helpful. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you got any questions, please send me a text or a message. And other than that, I hope you have a great evening. Eat something healthy, get some sleep tonight, and we'll talk to you tomorrow night at 6. Let me know if I can help you.